What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today I'm talking about virtual reality with the side of Oculus Rift and touch controllers. For background, I'm one of the legions who has pushed it over the edge and into the Rift. See what I did there? Due to the summer sale pricing where the Rift was on sale with the touch for $400. I wouldn't say I was a skeptic of virtual reality. I wouldn't say I was a fanboy of virtual reality going into this. Rather hesitant and realistic about it, I would say. As for the games I enjoy, I'm mainly a racing sim, flight sim, occasionally FPS type of guy currently. So that's where I'm coming from. Long review made short, it's really freaking cool. When it's working right, that is. There are a fair few issues that need to be addressed, and they aren't the ones that are most commonly talked about, such as the resolution or screen door effect. Rather, I find the bigger issue is making virtual reality actually work. This is why, in my opinion, this doesn't need to be specifically a Rift review, as the hardware is what it is. At the end of the day, some may side with the Rift or the Vive or any one of the other headsets that are out there, but I don't think that what truly matters to virtual reality currently is just the hardware. Rather, the issue is figuring out how to actually make virtual reality games that are really cool and really awesome outside of certain hand-picked experiences right now where the whole thing just works brilliantly. A lot of times, it is indeed just a gimmick. A lot of other times, it's freaking sweet. So let's go ahead and jump on in. As for my setup, I am using the standard 2-sensor desk-mounted setup with a medium play space roughly about 6 foot by 8 foot in size. Over the top I have a ceiling fan overhead, and you didn't think of that before, probably, but you should think about that. At least I didn't think about it. I'd suggest hanging some yarn or something from your fan, sort of as a pseudo warning track for your hand when you're making overhand motions. Also, don't play with the fan turned on if the game requires you to reach overhead if you do have a fan in your play space. Ask me how I know. I still have all my fingers though. As for PC specs, I have an i7 6700K running at 4.5 gigahertz, NVIDIA GTX 1070, runs some goofy clock speed, who knows. They all overclock and do their own thing. As well as 16 gigs of RAM, everything's running off a solid state drive, yada yada yada. Pretty standard setup, and I think very representative of the setup in terms of the PC that you should be expecting to have if you're going to get into VR and have a good solid experience more often than not. So first off, why did I go with the Rift and why not the Vive? I've actually had this question asked a couple of times, and I understand there's always, side A versus side B, red versus blue, left versus right and all that stuff. But the answer is simple, as you can probably figure out. The answer was, of course, price. That is all that mattered in this case, because I felt with the technology being where it is currently, the Vive was simply too pricey for me to justify, given that we're going to see rapid improvements here in the early years of virtual reality that actually is possible, that actually works. This is not the Nintendo Virtual Boy. This is actually going to be a thing that is actually going to improve and go forward. Then there is the question of, how does this work? Is it going to make you go blind, and what if you need glasses? So first of all, these headsets have two eyes. How convenient. And the games render a view from where your left eye should be and where your right eye should be. By drawing these two different point of views in front of your eyes, you end up getting a 3D image that is actually pretty convincing. Convincing enough you will want to flip switches instinctively until you remind yourself there is no switch to be flipped. The switch is a lie. Again, another question I've seen over my recent videos in virtual reality. The video that you see in most videos of virtual reality are just one eye's point of view. This is why they're generally offset. You're only seeing the left eye rather than the left and the right eye like you would seeing for yourself, like you do in the headset for yourself. So it may look offset, but it's not that way when you're actually playing it. You'll also see some smaller little movements that happen, kind of little jitters and things like that. You don't actually see those or feel those because your brain processes out those small little movements that might be visible on screen, but instead, to you in the headset, again, you don't notice them. And contrary to what you may think at a cursory glance, your eyes aren't actually focusing on a screen 3 inches from your face. Thanks to the lenses inside, your eyes are focusing on something roughly about 1.5 meters away, roughly 5 feet, which is much more comfortable than 3 inches away. In other words, though, if you can't see without your glasses if you wear them at 5 feet away, you will either need to wear glasses, get contacts, order prescription lens inserts, which are available, or something else. For me, my glasses didn't fit anywhere near close to comfortable, despite being within the guidelines that Oculus have published. It was uncomfortable enough I wouldn't consider it a viable option, and I would strongly suggest if you do wear glasses that you are aware of this going into purchasing virtual reality if you choose to. I didn't want to wear contacts because they're just more hassle than what it's worth for me, because I have no problems with glasses, which meant lens inserts or the something else was the other option to correct my vision. I am nearsighted. So I took the much cheaper option, which is the something else option, which you can find down in the description. Doing this for about 20 bucks, I got prescription lenses added into my headset with pretty much no downsides. If you prefer your things a little bit more pre-built and ready to go from your purchase, lens inserts are available for roughly about $60 on up. And if you have good vision, well, congratulations, you're lucky. So how is the visual quality anyways? Visual clarity is one of the most debated topics in relation to virtual reality, and it really depends on what type of game you are playing, I find. While I certainly miss the crispiness of my 1440 monitor in general, for things like racing sims, it's not really an issue, while for flight sims, it certainly can be. If a game needs you to pick out small details from a long distance or is dependent on picking up very fine detail within textures, you're probably going to have a bad time in virtual reality. For example, you can read the cockpit panels in flight simulators relatively easily. You may need to lean in slightly just to get a good look at it, but it's doable. However, spotting things at a distance, I found I had a little luck short of just enabling the labels just to get a reasonably close representation of a real world level of vision. Though it's always been an issue, including on a monitor, and that's always been one of the challenges. Now, I don't think it's unusable, but for those of you guys out there who care more about raw competitiveness and trying to get all the advantages that you possibly can at the cost of immersion, well, you're probably going to want to stick with a monitor because you're probably not going to like that trade-off. As for the much discussed screen door effect, again, it depends. In high-speed games, I find I generally don't have any time to notice it at all, while in slower-moving games, it can certainly be distracting. In my experience, though, once you get immersed into the game world and stop looking for it, you more or less stop noticing it. Or I guess, should I say, stop caring about it. More annoying and less discussed, though, are the God rays. These are the annoying little buggers, and even before the lens insert that I am using, it was an issue. They show up as sort of ghostly looking smears, most noticeably on white text on a darker background, or for example racing at night on an oval with the lights. It's there, it's obvious, very obvious. I'd equate this effect more to like wearing glasses that have a smudge on them or a fingerprint, only you don't have a smudge or a fingerprint on them. It's doable, it's usable, it's just annoying. It's not enough to stop me from enjoying the experience, but I find this far more problematic than all the other issues with virtual reality in terms of the visual clarity side of things. I've heard that some people don't notice them or don't have them, so maybe it's a manufacturing thing and every headset is slightly different, but your mileage may vary. I also found that there was a hint of visual distortion from the lenses themselves, again, even before I added in the inserts. Though it wasn't too bad and I quickly adapted to it because that's what your brain does. I'd say it's similar to the first time you wear glasses, or if you lucky guys with good vision have ever tried on some glasses, even non-prescription glasses. Like, it may feel goofy at first, but eventually your brain will be all like, okay, yeah, figure this out, and yeah, and you'll move on. Overall, I'd really equate the visual quality side of things to being fairly comparable to a console. It's usable, it's serviceable, but you do lose out on the sharp and crisp textures and visuals. If you put a premium on image quality in particular, this is probably going to be bad enough to turn you off virtual reality currently. If you can accept these compromises, however, I think you'll find that it isn't as bad as it is often made out to be, perhaps even in this video itself. As for the field of view, I would roughly equate it to about a 100-degree field of view. I believe it's generally quoted to be a 110-degree field of view, but I think with your head shape it will differ slightly, so that could be why. While that isn't as wide as a well set up triple screen setup, when coupled with the head tracking, it's enough that you can feel comfortable within the game world and you can see your surroundings well enough. The big difference, though, is that you have a far higher vertical field of view than any other, monitor setup around, besides goofy, custom, off-the-wall type of things. For example, in racing sims, you can generally see your feet down where the pedals are, but you can also see like the roll bar above or the roof, in a closed cockpit car. You have that much vertical field of view. It's nearly uncompromised and uninterrupted from what your eyes actually have in real life. I'll talk a little bit more about the effect that has later on in this video. As for the touch controllers, they are nothing short of fantastic. They feel very, very natural in the hands with easily assessed buttons. Gripping things is done easily, and while pointing at things or giving a thumbs up requires a little bit more effort than you think it should, I find the buttons are perhaps a little oversensitive for my tastes. Could just be my hand shape, though. I did find it easy enough to get used to. Positioning your hands in the 3D space, the 3D game world around you, works wonderfully. Before giving this a go for myself, I thought in the videos that I had watched previously, it looked like it was really tricky to get your hands positioned properly within the world. While various games can be slightly finicky, expecting your hands to be in precisely this position with precisely this gesture, perhaps to a over-the-top degree, it really isn't difficult. It's actually very natural and very easy because, you're in the game. Your hand is in the game. It's freaky. I also have to say that they track much better than what I expected. Far better than what I've experienced with things like the Nintendo Wii or Track IR and similar devices. Though it can have some issues when you do get to the edges of the sensor's vision, or obviously if something blocks the sensor, which in a desktop scenario is most likely to be a steering wheel, a joystick. Yeah, so you may need to adjust your setup and the way you do things to suit the sensors. You can also add a third sensor, which is recommended by Oculus for 360-degree full room scale VR experiences, but I haven't really found myself needing that, and I think that would improve the tracking in certain scenarios, but I don't feel like it's necessary for the way I use it, and more of a simulation-oriented gameplay, I guess I could say. So again, just something to consider as an additional cost if that is something you're interested in. Then there is also the question of how beefy of a system do you need for virtual reality? You need to be running games at 90 frames per second. In terms of the resolution and overall demands, I find it comparable to what I was experiencing driving my 2560 by 1440 monitor. The big difference, of course, is that you must keep the frame rate up. On a monitor, going from 90 to 75 FPS wouldn't be too noticeable at all, but in virtual reality it can be quite obvious and quite annoying. While a synchronous space warp, which is sort of like VSync for the Rift, and the Vive also has a similar technology that does more or less the exact same thing to smooth out the experience and eliminate tearing and bad experiences, which are very disorienting in virtual reality potentially. The game will actually chop the frame rate down to 45 FPS as soon as you drop below 90 FPS. While games are often tolerable to play at 45 frames a second, I would not suggest it. I did not like it one bit. I do not like it one bit. I notice it, it annoys me, and it just does not feel good at all. I really would say you have to be at 90 FPS or it ain't worth it. This is also why many games developed specifically for virtual reality in mind tend to be scaled back or heavily stylized graphically. Of course, that enables them to perform well, but it does impose certain limitations in terms of the game design and the game world and the graphics, of course, so yeah. But here's the big question, 15 minutes in. I can't help it. How is the experience, and are you gonna puke the first time you give it a go in virtual reality? First of all, regarding the puking, your mileage may vary, obviously. I haven't puked. I found it quite easy to adapt to for the most part, though some head movements do tend to be worse than others. In particular, forced panning shots or hitting the curbing really hard in a racing game, or going inverted in a flight simulator. It's tolerable. I can handle it without too much of an issue, but it is kind of like, let's not do that too terribly much. But what is a bit easier to answer is the question of experience. And the experience is where virtual reality truly shines and where it becomes apparent that there are a host of issues that cannot just be solved by a higher resolution headset. So let's start with the bad side of the experience. First of all, you can't see outside of the VR headset. While it's obvious, you need to be aware of your surroundings. Both the Rift and the Vive do have systems that display in-game to show you when you are approaching the limits of your predefined play space. However, those also cannot account for things like people or animals entering your play space. So for example, if you're a dog owner or a cat owner, you're probably going to need to keep them in a different room, or you might risk trampling over Fido, and that would not be good. Then there is also the comfort issue. It can get relatively hot inside the headset, as well as it does put some pressure on your face. I find it comfortable enough to wear and view for about an hour or so at a time without an issue, but I do find that I want to take breaks consistently. Then there's also the comfort issue. It can get relatively warm inside the headset, and it is a bit of pressure on your face and on your head. I found it comfortable enough to wear for an hour or two without too terribly much issue, but I do find that I want to take breaks. Of course, we all know that you're supposed to take a 15-minute break for every hour you play, right? Right, guys? It's not even so much the eye strain that is discomfortable, but when you combined it all, the eye strain from just the fact that things aren't as crisp as your brain would like them, and then the face pressure and the head pressure, and then the little bit of extra warmness, it is something where you will want to pace yourself, I find. But then we get to the big problem, and that's the fact I can't really see virtual reality benefiting every game. While some types of games work excellently in virtual reality, I can't really see how an open world third-person RPG would be made better by virtual reality. Why would you want to play a strategy game in virtual reality as it is currently? While there may be upsides and cool things that can be done, does it actually improve the game? For example, FPS games, in my opinion, actually kind of feel weird to play because you can't really walk from place to place, and instead games often rely on a teleportation mechanic, which gets tiring because it's just no frickin' fun at all, or alternatively using the joystick built into the touch controllers, which feels odd in a different way. Even something as simple as moving in virtual reality is not simple. To demonstrate this, let's talk about Doom. It's a series most everyone is familiar with to one degree or another, and conveniently one that is also scheduled to have a virtual reality release later this year. In simple terms, there is not a chance in hell that the classic Doom formula of running like a madman, killing demons like Doom Guy truly should while listening to badass music, will ever work in virtual reality. Its movement, which is one of the core pillars of the gameplay, is totally incompatible with what virtual reality is capable of currently, and the precision of the mouse is still better than what most any person can hope to achieve in virtual reality with the hand controllers. It's a recipe for motion sickness and would require the player to be Doom Guy himself to not die in an instant. Instead, for better or worse, the virtual reality version of Doom looks like something totally entirely different than the classic Doom formula, because in order for it to work, it can't be the classic Doom formula. I really feel that this is the biggest issue with virtual reality and its future in gaming. It's not just the question of making a higher resolution headset which will fix the visual aspect of things that is often talked about, but making more game types work well within virtual reality. This is, for the most part, a game development approach problem in my opinion. It's something that will only be figured out with time and experience, and figuring out what things do work and what things don't work. The standard games that we all know and play have been figured out. For example, by now everybody knows that W, A, S, and D are your movement keys and you aim with the mouse. You go back 20, 25 years ago, that wasn't so clear cut. I think we'll see the same thing with virtual reality, but as it is now, that's the big issue. So if you're one of those people who's all like, but they're going to come out with a higher resolution headset in a year and a half, because it probably will be about a year and a half, I wouldn't have that approach, because I don't think that's the simple issue here. That is the basic issue that people want to talk about, but that's not the real issue. But then there is the plus side of the experience. When virtual reality is working right in a game that it's geared for, it is nothing short of amazing. In other words, games that aren't relying upon movement. If you're into racing sims or flight sims, this is where it absolutely shines if you have the proper controllers, such as a steering wheel and a joystick, preferably a HOTAS. With the presence granted by seeing only the image in front of your face, and that being in 3D, the acceptable field of view, and the head tracking, the game world takes on a whole new look. In particular, things like going wheel to wheel at 220 plus miles an hour in an Indy car, or flying above the clouds in a World War II, fighter at sunset, nothing short of amazing. Many have said that they cannot go back to monitors after using virtual reality, and while I could go back to monitors if I absolutely had to, there is no reason I would want to if I had the choice. The move to virtual reality in that sense is a real next generation experience. The bar was shifted as soon as I stepped into the Rift. These are some terrible puns, I apologize. The first thing I want to talk about is the head tracking in particular. Thanks to this, you can easily get rid of all those extra displays that are just compromising for the lack of information due to the limitations of a monitor. You don't need on-screen information, you don't need speedometer information, you don't need that bar that tells you how fast your plane's traveling, what heading you're on, because you can just look at the frickin' gauge in an instant just like you would in the real thing, and it works brilliantly. It has totally changed those experiences for me in an instant. It's like, bing! This is how it actually works. This is amazing. And unlike devices designed for head tracking, such as TrackIR, or the various other competitors out there for it, it's actually natural. You'll look at what you want to see, everything's done in a one-to-one movement, which makes it simple as can be, rather than, for example, TrackIR, where you turn your head away, but you'll look with your eyes back at your monitor and do that, and all sorts of profiles. None of that. It just freaking works, and it works amazingly. And especially the World War II combat stuff, or the air combat stuff, you're looking all over the place, in your chair, just yes, yes. If you can't tell, yeah, it's awesome. And then there's this sense of scale, sort of jumping back to what I said earlier about the field of view. It may sound weird, but even at the mathematically correct field of view on a monitor, you don't have the same sense of scale that you do in virtual reality. The things are the same size, they will appear the same size as the proper field of view, but they don't have the same sense of scale. And I really feel it is because of that increased field of view compared to a monitor, which gives your eyes and brains a bit more to reference to understand how big or small something actually is. It grounds the objects in the game world, if that makes any sense. For example, on a proper field of view in a racing sim, you'll probably just see the top of the dashboard and out the window. But you don't have as many visual references to truly give you that full sense of scale, such as the steering wheel in your virtual hands, your feet down there, the roll bar over the top of you. The 110 degree field of view that you get on a monitor is not the same 110 field of view that you get in virtual reality. And really, when you put this all together, movements end up taking on more depth and feeling than what you will ever get from a monitor. For example, rolling inverted leads to a bizarre sensation where everything you see is upside down. Your eyes and your brain is telling you you're upside down, but your inner ear is telling you that, yeah, nope, you're still firmly seated right side up as you should be. Wrapping up the experience side of things, it really depends on what type of game you play. flight simulation, racing sims, racing games with virtual reality support, like, no complaints. It works so fantastically because those experiences are basically tailor-made to virtual reality, and it works fantastically there. I'll just say personally, I'm a flight simulation guy. I've kind of been in and out of it over the various years, sort of tailing away due to a lack of interest in some of the products available on the market. But coming back to IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad, it's a game I played a bit, but I never really got into, whereas in virtual reality it's like, this is the next level. This is something above and beyond, and like, I just can't help but play it and just like work on my aerial gunnery because I'm a terrible shot. Just like, alright, we're gonna get back into the flow of this because this is freaking sweet. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's just not awesome for everything, but when it's awesome, it's awesome. But of course, we're going to wrap this up with sim racing specifically, as this is what the channel is built on, and it would be wrong to not mention a few things on this video, questions that have been asked since switching to virtual reality. First of all, I am no slower or faster, though I feel it may ultimately allow me to be faster in certain situations where corners became blind due to the monitor being the limiting factor. I would not, though, suggest switching to VR with the belief that you will magically go faster, as I believe that is the wrong reason to do that, as well as lead to inevitable disappointment when you find out you're still slow, unless you're fast. My car control is both better and worse. On the one hand, I do find that I have a better feel, so I'm less likely to have a big moment. On the other hand, I do find it is more difficult to gauge just how much input is the correct amount of input when I do have a moment. Although then again, I do feel like a lot of this is just getting more and more comfortable over time and is largely a non-issue. And last but not least, there is the question of virtual reality versus the triple screen setup, which has become almost standard within sim racing. It's a tough decision, especially made more tough because a virtual reality headset on the sale price becomes basically the cheapest triple screen setup you could possibly get brand new. But my personal answer is clear. Virtual reality is the way to go, depending on your needs. Well, yes, it's a cop-out and it's not really necessarily a clear answer. Let me explain here. The racing itself is amazing in VR. The driving itself is amazing in VR. On that front, I would suggest VR over triple screens. Sim racing is almost tailor-made for virtual reality, and as you can probably tell from the last 5 minutes of this video, it works awesomely. However, there is also the practical side of a triple monitor setup. There is no motion sickness to deal with if you are potentially prone to that. There's a higher field of view, which can be an advantage. And, well, if you have small kids, animals around, being able to see the world around you is probably a much better thing than being disconnected from the real world. As well as the fact that you can do more things with a triple screen setup. It can be used for more games that maybe don't support virtual reality. And then there's also the fact that I really would not want to do a race more than an hour or two in VR. And while that's long enough for the vast majority of races, for those of you guys who mainly do endurance races of 6, 12, 24 hours even, you may find it a bit too much to deal with over that course of extended play. But depending really on where you end up lying in that question of how do you play these games, yes, I would suggest virtual reality over a triple screen setup because the price is actually probably cheaper than some more fancy, less, just get me 3 monitors and that's that. Setups, and I do think it has advantages with the head tracking as well as the immersive 3D experience and the presence that you gain. I think it is definitely the way to go, unless, again, you fall into those scenarios where a triple screen setup is just a much better option for your personal tastes, your personal needs. And really, I'll just say this. Monitors aren't going away anytime soon because virtual reality ain't anywhere close to replacing the monitor as it is now, so don't fret about it. So, wrapping up this 30-minute video, virtual reality can be incredibly impressive when it's working right. Asterisk, always. In some ways, it is very much a revolution that a lot of people have made it out to be. In some ways, it is also very much the gimmick that they don't want to tell you that it is. So that's that. Would I recommend it? Yes. Do I have any regrets? No, not at all. But then again, for the games I play, it works fantastically. So I've ranted, I've raved. I hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.